Good morning. Because victims matter, today I'm launching a major initiative to count the number of untested sexual assault kits across the Commonwealth. This count was prompted by Senate Joint Resolution 20, sponsored by my friend Senator Denise Harper Angel, which calls on the Auditor's Office to count the number of untested sexual assault kits that are currently in the possession of law enforcement. These kits contain important biological evidence collected from sexual assault victims during an investigation. They may contain DNA from suspects that can be used to identify an unknown suspect by comparing it against the National DNA Database or to bolster a prosecutor's case against a known suspect. Cities such as Detroit, Houston, Fort Worth, and New York have conducted similar counts that have led to the identification and conviction of hundreds of rapists. Houston turned up 850 hits on the national database after testing some 6,600 kits that had gone untested for years. Charges have been filed against 29 people, 6 of whom have already been convicted. In Detroit, as testing has begun on a backlog of more than 11,000 untested kits, the prosecutor's office has already identified 188 potential serial rapists from just the first 2,000 kits tested and entered into the database. Today I'm joined by a sexual assault survivor, Michelle Kuiper, whose assault evidence kit was tested 11 years after she was grabbed from her Cherokee Park home in Louisville and assaulted underneath a neighbor's deck. Evidence from her kit matched evidence from 2 other survivors' kits. In 2011, DNA evidence from those 3 kits matched that of a man who is now behind bars. This is a powerful illustration that victims matter. Michelle had to wait 17 years for justice, but justice was finally served. We should never give up on trying to make sure that those who commit these awful crimes are brought to justice. The Center for Disease Control estimates that 47% of Kentucky women have experienced sexual violence, a rate that is slightly higher than the national average. And let's be clear, because amongst the facts and the figures, my friends, we often lose sight of the fact that these are our sisters, our wives, our mothers, our daughters, and our friends. The ultimate goal of this effort is to identify perpetrators of sexual violence who have been walking free and bring justice to their survivors. Fixing this system so the problem doesn't happen again will be the next priority. To that end, I've decided to go beyond the simple resolution passed by the legislature and examine the underlying reasons certain kits never get tested, studying best practices from around the country, and making recommendations for meaningful and effective reform. The Kentucky State Police estimate there are hundreds, if not thousands, of untested kits in the hands of local law enforcement. There is no cost to local law enforcement to submit the kits for analysis, although there may be some valid reason for not submitting certain kits for analysis to the Kentucky State Police Central Lab here in Frankfort. Complexities involved in investigating sexual assaults may be causing confusion among individual law enforcement agencies. A lack of policies, regulations, and statutes to clearly guide local law enforcement may possibly be contributing to the problem. In the next few days, my office will be sending surveys to more than 400 local law enforcement agencies across Kentucky to begin assessing how many kits are in their possession and what policies and procedures are in place to guide the handling of those kits. This count will allow the Kentucky State Police to pursue millions of dollars in grant money, both federal and nonprofit foundations, to clear up this backlog and to establish a real awaiting analysis of what's going on at the lab, as well as many of those in the hands of local law enforcement. I ask agencies to complete this simple 19-question survey quickly and completely, and to do so via the internet option that we provided, if at all possible. We're distributing the surveys through both email and traditional mail, and if your agency hasn't received one and feel like they should, please contact my office. My office also plans to examine issues related to staffing and equipment at the KSP lab. KSP officials estimate it takes between 6 and 9 months to test kits due to a lack of resources and an increase in the amount of biological evidence submitted to the lab each year. Folks, at the end of the day, making sure that the most basic fundamental responsibility of government, and recognizing that that is public safety, we've got to make sure that those who are charged with our public safety have the resources they need to effectively do their job for the rest of us. Finally, I want to thank the Kentucky State Police, the Kentucky Sheriff's Association, the Kentucky State Fraternal Order of Police, and the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs for their support of this initiative. Cooperation by stakeholders, all who are committed to doing right by victims, is the key to the success of this effort. And let me be clear, this is not an occasion to unnecessarily judge or to cast aspersions on our heroes in law enforcement and prosecutorial community who are doing the right thing. This is simply an effort that is focused on nothing but a common goal, which is putting more criminals behind bars and serving justice to Kentuckians who have been the victims of sexual assaults. This is about bringing good people together who are doing good work to improve a system to make sure it works on behalf of those who need it and works to bring to justice those who have abused our people. It's important to note that it's often easy in the facts and the figures, particularly in the work that I do, to look at these things as academic matters, to look at them as policy issues that don't impact the lives of real Kentuckians. And I think it's incredibly important as we look for momentum and we look for the reason why we do this work, to understand that there is a human face behind all of these statistics. And I know of no better representative than a terrific victims' rights advocate who is not only working hard to endorse what we're doing today, but will be continuing to be a part of our effort to bring justice for victims of sexual assault. I'd like you to welcome Michelle Kuiper.
Thank you. He pretty much told you a little bit of my story and how it happened. I was a freshman in college. I basically moved to a city where I did not know, so it was all new to me. You're just kind of coming out on your own, and you're becoming a woman, and you're out from your parents' thumb for the first time. And I just remember getting this nice apartment in Cherokee Park, and my dog was going to be put to sleep the next day, and it was my childhood dog, so I remember going to the front porch just to get some fresh air, and within moments, I just remember being taken off of my front porch. It was a very traumatic experience for me. I feel like it's one that really changed my life, and the giddy young girl that I was back then had changed. But out of that also came a strength that I didn't have once before. I feel like that I have grown so much from when that started till now. So to kind of go ahead, in 2005 I had received a call that basically I had matched 2 other women, and that our DNA matched someone, they just didn't know who, because they were trying to find the flashlight rapist of Louisville and put a case together for him. So I knew then I had matched 2 others, and I think that that was the time where I felt like this was the most real. This was like now a serial person. He was an unknown person to me, so I was always afraid he could find me at some point. Then kind of flashed back even further in 2011, I get a call, and then the detective, Ann Cohen, had called me to let me know that they did find him, that actually he was brought in on another charge. He was swabbed for his DNA, and our DNA was matched. So I don't know, just everything rushed over me at that moment, thinking I was reliving a lot of old feelings that I had really recouped from, and I thought I had put way back in my mind and had gone forward, and I didn't realize that this was something that was just really something ongoing with me. So just to go through, I think, that whole ordeal, put it very forefront in the media. A lot of things were going on at that time, and I guess there were a lot of cases at the time of mine. But I think what I've learned out of all of this is that really when women come forward and men come forward because they have been assaulted, they come forward because they have the strength within them that they find somewhere, like, I don't know where I found that strength, but you find it somewhere deep down inside of you. And to know that there's protocols in place, that everything is going to be handled in a fashion that you know you're going to be taken care of, kind of makes you feel a little more at ease. So my case was great because it came out with a very good outcome, and that is he's in prison now for 33 years, and he will be in his 80s before he's set free. There's really no prison term that would have been enough for him, is the way I feel about that. But I am very thankful for the detective and Tom Vander Rostein and the judge and everyone who played a part in putting him away, because it was very important. But in the retrospect of that is that we're not just black and white on a piece of paper. We are real people. We have real lives we have to go back to. I was a freshman, and I don't share this with a lot of people, but I never finished school because of it. I never finished my college education, and I was a very good student, so I'm just now going back to do that with KSAP's help and Eileen's help. I'm going to go back to finish my college. So I just thank everyone here and thank everyone for what they're doing, because we are real. We are not just one out of two, or we're not just, you know, one of 6 men or one of 5 women, one of 4 women on campus. We're real people, and we have real lives, and we have real families, and so I'm just thankful that you had me here today to share.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent job. That was very powerful, and thank you. And I think it underscores something I want to point out, is that without question this will be the most important thing that the Auditor's Office does this year. And we do it because we have people who are counting on us to make government work for victims, and we're going to be an important part of making that process, and we're going to do it for you and so many other victims. I was in terms of getting religion on this subject, I was a little late. And when it was brought to me, like a lot of other policymakers, that this was an issue in Kentucky, folks, I just couldn't believe it. And at first I was shocked, and then I was sick to my stomach, and then I brought in the experts. And someone whom I have relied on for a lot of advice in this space over the year is Gretchen Hunt, who is the staff attorney for the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs, who's an outstanding representative of that very important agency. People who have been working in this space in a profound way before I even knew that there was an issue. And I want to give real credit to the advocates of victims who have been keeping this issue burning and who really did an important job in bringing it to my attention. So Gretchen, I hope you'll come up and say a few words about your excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor Edelen. On behalf of KSAP, which is the coalition of 13 rape crisis centers across the Commonwealth, I want to thank you, and especially your hardworking staff, as well as the Kentucky State Police and our other law enforcement partners, for taking this momentous step. As Auditor Edelen talked about, when 20% of Kentucky women have experienced rape, 47% of women and 20% of men have experienced some form of sexual violence, we're facing an epidemic in Kentucky. And we must join together to ensure that victims come forward to report rape, that their cases are investigated properly, and that perpetrators are brought to justice. This audit, this count of untested rape kits, sends such a clear message to victims, to survivors like Michelle, and thank you so much for your courage in coming forward today. It sends such a clear message that you matter, that we believe as a society that rape is a serious crime deserving of great attention, that we believe you, and that you should find justice when you come forward, when you have the courage to come forward to report. Most of all, we do want to thank Senator Denise Harper Angel for her long-standing commitment to these issues, for her courage to sponsor a resolution to begin this process. She was unable to be here today, but she asked me to share a few remarks. She states, "I regret that due to a previous commitment which could not be rescheduled, I'm unable to participate in this historic announcement today with Auditor Edelen. I do, however, want to express my appreciation that my legislation, Senate Joint Resolution 20, overwhelmingly passed the General Assembly, and that our state auditor and the Kentucky State Police Forensic Crime Lab have shown such enthusiastic support. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for women who have been victims of sexual assault. Having the number of rape kits documented is the first step in obtaining funding to have them tested, and by doing so we ensure a better opportunity for quick justice and a better opportunity to take criminals off the streets. Every woman who submits to a rape test deserves to know that it will be tested. Having the actual count is a big first step in clearing the shelves of untested sexual assault kits and a big step forward for Kentucky. Thank you so much.
Very good, Gretchen. Thank you. Certainly, we have had law enforcement and the prosecutor community have been laboring for an awfully long time to bring these horrible criminals to justice, and they have done really an outstanding job, and our work is going to be informed over the next several months by their good advice and counsel about how to improve a system from top to bottom to make sure that it works for victims and that it facilitates punishing perpetrators. And we have been particularly pleased with the strong support we've had from the Kentucky State Fraternal Order of Police and their president, Burl Perdue. Burl has offered great words of support and advice and good counsel as we have set out the scope of work, and I certainly would like to recognize Burl and have him come make a few remarks. Good to see you, Sheriff.
Good to see you.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you a lot.
First, I'd like to thank Adam for taking on this great endeavor. It's a monumental task. And also, I'd like to thank him for letting law enforcement have a voice and make an imprint on the process here. Kentucky State Law and Fraternal Order of Police, which consists of 10,000 members strong across their Commonwealth, we strongly support and encourage the enactment of Senate Joint 20, Resolution 20. This enactment will greatly assist and support all law enforcement agencies across their Commonwealth in extremely, and I'd like to emphasize that, extremely important investigations of sexual assault cases and all other cases connected to these investigations. The state FOP, we applaud the leadership of all parties involved in passing this resolution, and we will support the implementation in any way possible to see this through. And again, I thank Adam for taking on this great endeavor. It's not a small one.
No, sir, it's not.
It's going to do well.
Thank you, Sheriff.
sir.
I appreciate you a lot. Somebody have any questions?
Auditor Edelen,
Yes,
as
sir.
you embark on this, what are the estimates you have heard about how many untested kits are out there across the state?
We have a very close relationship with the Kentucky State Police, and they estimate it could be hundreds, if not thousands. So we think that's a pretty good assessment. We will know. We move pretty quickly, and Tom, you'll remember we're uniquely skilled to do this kind of work in the auditor's office. Just a few years ago, we had no idea how many special taxing districts there are in Kentucky. We went about the process of inventorying every single one in every county. So we have the relationships and the skill set to do this, and my sense is that we will be back early in the fall with a accurate and granular count about precisely what we're dealing with. And that's important, again, because it helps us leverage federal money to clean up the backlog. And when you clean up backlogs, victims get justice and bad guys go to prison.
So are we just talking about a backlog here, or is it, rape kits that are in possession of maybe sheriff's offices?
Sure, absolutely.
Like
We're reaching out to about 400 individual law enforcement agencies to get an assessment of not just how many they are, their unprocessed kits there are, but where they are. And we need to have, and from that, because I really do believe, and I know this is novel in a lot of places in Frankfurt, but I think opinions ought to be grounded in little things called facts. We're going to get the facts about what we're dealing with here, and then we're going to work hand in glove with victims, their advocates, local and state law enforcement, and the prosecutorial community to try to come up with recommendations that might make it easier on everybody who are clearly trying to do the right thing.
Now, as you start this, which is the I guess the more pressing issue? Is it this backlog in the state police lab, or is it law enforcement agencies hanging on to?
Well, we just don't know, and that's that's why it's important for us to get the information that we need that will come as a result of local law enforcement and indeed the state police responding to our request for information, and from that we'll have a clearer picture.
I know you spoke generally about why kits weren't being submitted by local law enforcement. Can you speak anything to about why they're held?
Well, you know, there are various reasons. Sometimes you get a guilty plea. Sometimes law enforcement know precisely through other evidence who the perpetrators are. So there are some incidences where rape kits have not been sent on to the state lab. But I think moving forward, what we need is a clear set of policies about precisely which kits ought to be tested every time. But before we can get there, folks, we've got to size the universe. We've got to know precisely the size of the problem that we're dealing with. If it's an issue like Detroit, my goodness, 11,000, that's extraordinary, and almost 200 potential serial rapists identified just from the first 2,000 kits that have been processed. That's a big deal. So there are a lot of questions that have to be answered, and believe me, there's nobody who wants these questions answered more than I do. But we have to know how big of the universe we're dealing with so before we can even know what the right questions to ask are.
I want to ask you about the deadline. You're sending the surveys out when?
This week. They'll be out in the next few days. Jack, as you know, we don't let a lot of grass grow here in the auditor's office.
And you will ask these law enforcement agencies to respond by, you'll give them a date?
In real time. We are finalizing in consultation with law enforcement and the advocates the survey, which I suspect will be done and out the door in the next couple of days. We go through this process, and I am confident that local law enforcement, given the amount of constituency support we have, is going to treat this very, very seriously. Isn't that right, Sheriff? So for those who straggle, and this sort of thing happens, I mean, we need to understand, folks, we've got law enforcement agencies in Kentucky that don't have fax machines, much less email. That's why I have directed my staff to put an incredible amount of focus and energy on this, because we're not just going to be passive about getting the information. Good grief, the lesson we learned from special taxing districts, if we'd allowed these folks to report on themselves, we'd never gotten the information. So we're confident, because of the trust that we built up in the process, that we're going to get the information in. If there are those who choose not to willingly provide the information, I would point out that the auditor has subpoena power.
But you haven't set a deadline.
No, we're gonna work and attack these issues individually, and I'm confident that we can work through the summer and have an overwhelming majority of responses from law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, this is in the best interest of law enforcement. The one thing I know from working with prosecutors and cops is that they want a system that works better. They don't need an elected official telling them how to do their job. Far from it. These are people who chose their profession because they're passionate about it. What we need to do is what we do really well here in the auditor's office, which is provide a process that works better for people who are trying to do their job. And I think this effort will be no different.
At this stage, can you say there should be a law that would require law enforcement agencies to turn these in by a certain time, so this won't happen again?
I can't say that, Jack, because I don't. We're not grounded enough in the facts. But certainly, I think that's something that could be on the table.
Are essentially all of these kits tested at the state police crime lab when they are tested?
Well, I want to walk you through the process. The kits, the process is performed at a local hospital or healthcare facility. Local law enforcement then has the option of sending it on to the state police to have it processed at no cost. But let's be pretty clear: the KSP Crime Lab is under-resourced and understaffed, and as a result, it takes 6 to 9 months to process that kit. Law enforcement also has the option of sending on kits to various other private sector suppliers of these services, but Tom, that's expensive.
With 6 to 9 months, even if it is sort of a local priority
Yes,
case, if they
Yes,
ship the
Yes,
KSP, it's got to get in line with behind other.
Correct, because we're living in a world in which KSP Crime Lab is a perfect example of government that is trying to do more with fewer resources. I mean, let's be crystal clear. The need has increased dramatically. 20 years ago, there wasn't as much conversation at all about biological evidence. Now it's become a key part of any prosecutor's case. So while we have cut resources to the crime lab as part of the economic reality that we've been in for the last several years, we also have to consider the fact that these folks are trying to do more with less resources. And you can't expect people to do things better, faster, and cheaper.
I want to clarify one point, just to be sure. In Michelle's case, basically it was getting a test result in that case and using the findings there, comparing it with others.
Correct.
That was the breakthrough in finding and convicting the rapist in that
Michelle, that's
situation.
about the sum of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So they basically were trying to put a case together for the flashlight rapist who had a lot of cases against him. And I was told that when they were testing all of those kits from the late 80s through the 90s, that mine, along with 2 other women, that we matched each other, but we did not match him.
But your test had been tested before 11 years, right?
I don't know.
You don't know?
They
You don't know.
they said they tested it at the time that they were testing everyone else's.
Do you know why it took so long then?
Is this a problem that you think, so talking about resources, that can only be resolved through additional funding for state police?
Listen, I think government's priorities ought to reflect our values, and I don't think that there is a more powerful value than that government ought to be an effective keeper of public safety. And when we're in a position when we're not fully funding those things that directly impact public safety, I think we need to consider what government's doing in other areas. I refuse to believe that this is that we need to. This is just another cry for more money, folks. This goes to the foundation of what good government is all about. The public safety is critical to good government, and making sure that everybody says that they're pro-victim. Everybody says that victims matter. We're going to review the system, and we're going to present recommendations for making it better, and we're going to come up with a stone-cold count of the number of unprocessed rape kits in Kentucky, and then we're going to reach out to other policymakers to make sure that what we have here is a system that works for victims and punishes the perpetrator.
There was some doubt last year about whether those federal grant programs would be funded. How important is it that they came through and funded them?
It's extraordinarily important, and there have been efforts by folks to do the important business of making sure these are funded in the budget. As you'll remember, he's not a member of my party, but he deserves credit for his efforts in making sure that the federal budget funded cleaning up the backlog. And Mitch McConnell had a press conference in the campaign, and as far as I know, has been active in making sure that we fully fund efforts by communities and municipalities and states to erase the backlog.
Given that you're getting into investigative procedures, law enforcement, things like that, do you plan on outsourcing with any law enforcement professionals throughout this audit? Or?
No, we will be working hand in glove with our partners, whether they be law enforcement, whether they be prosecutors, whether they be victims or their advocates. And I'm very pleased with the amount of brain power that we've brought that are focused on the common purpose, which is sizing the backlog and then coming up with recommendations for improving the system.
Has anybody talked to you about how many kits KESP processes in a year?
Sure, we have conversations with KSP multiple times a week, and we rely on them as a very important partner because they've been tracking what's come to them long before it ever came to the attention of our office.
So can you speak anything about the numbers, like
we have representatives KSP, and I think it's important that I don't speak for them. Perhaps after the event, we could make sure you get some time with them at the end of it.
So sometimes in these cases, I understand, Richard, the alleged victim will drop the charges. And are those kids still tested, or when the charges are dropped?
Gretchen.
So I think it depends, and one of the things we're curious about is just more data to better understand that, because in our experience, a victim, if informed about, the kit could be submitted still, and they could see if it's a serial case, maybe that would impact whether or not the victim has the courage to go forward. We've seen that happen on campus, sexual assault, for example, that impacts a victim's decision to go forward and prosecute if they know that they're protecting other people as well. But that goes back to that question of we don't quite know what happens because there's a lack of uniform policy on submitting the kit.
Does this survey include university police?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
And will all this will be made public record?
Yes, sir.
Potential of embarrassing some police agencies?
Oh, I don't think the police agencies are going to be embarrassed because I think they're going to choose to be the important part of this process that they have to be. And I'm really not. I really focus on the fact that people are drawn to law enforcement because they're genuinely in their DNA committed to justice. And this is an opportunity for us to make the case to not just other policymakers, but to the community more broadly, that there are things we can do to make their jobs easier while they're out there fighting the criminal element, trying to protect us every day.
Is it fair to say, based on the number of untested kits, that there could be hundreds of potential perpetrators roaming out there?
Absolutely.
And I want to be sure these recommendations, you hope they'll be ready for the 2016.
No, they'll be ready. They'll be ready.
Okay.
Listen, I want to be crystal clear about this. We have no more important initiative in the auditor's office right now than identifying the size and scope of this backlog and helping fix it. And I want to point out to you that we've done more special examinations in 3 years than my predecessor did in 8. And that is a testament to the extraordinary work of the people here in the auditor's office. And I think if there's one thing people in the community more broadly need to have comfort in, is that when we take on an initiative, we get it done. And we have counted the number of unknown special taxing districts in Kentucky. We have brought cybersecurity to everyone who deals with state government. We have done very big things in the auditor's office, and this is just in keeping with that tradition.
Gearing up, something may come out of this that leads to some legislation in the next year's General Assembly. Are you concerned that maybe if you do decide to run for another office, that politics could play a role in this legislation next year?
Listen, this is my focus, and the one thing that I took a lot of solace from is the fact that Senate Joint Resolution 20 passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The status quo outraged Republicans as much as it outraged Democrats. And we have a special and unique opportunity here to galvanize the whole of the body politic around a significant reform effort that not only will prove that victims matter, but that will bring some of the worst of the criminal element to justice. And that's going to be my key priority. And I will not take my eye off on the ball on this initiative, or frankly any other that I do in defense of the taxpayer.
I can't recall, did Senate Joint Resolution set a deadline that you're supposed with?
Yeah, this fall. I think it was this fall. We're comfortable. Jack, we're comfortable that we're going to come in on time with a real strong overview of what we're dealing with in Kentucky.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Else, thank you. Appreciate it a lot. It's my friends from the KSP, if they wouldn't mind to come up. Maybe we'll have some questions for them. Thank you. Your maiden voyage. This was really fantastic. You did a great job.
Basically, there are a couple of questions that I heard asked. We get about 500 to 600 sexual assault cases every year. That makes up about 25% of our actual caseload that comes through the door. We do DNA on anything from burglaries to homicides, sexual assaults. There's all types of evidence that we do DNA on. Sexual assaults are one part of it, and it's about 25 to 35% of our caseload. Our backlog right now is generally about 9 months. It's 6 to 9 months if you are looking at the more violent crimes, the sexual assaults, the homicides. For burglaries and whatnot, it's closer to 12 months. We do have a staffing shortage, but that is mostly because of retirements and resignations that have all happened at the same time. We're in the process of filling 6 positions right now that should definitely help us get out from under that and return our turnaround time back to about the 4-month level that it's supposed to be at. And this is common. Most states have about a 6-month turnaround time for sexual assault and homicide cases.
So these kids cover other crime, or is it just, do you have a similar backlog in other cases like burglaries, that, DNA testing for those?
Yes. It's basically that 6 to 9 turnaround time, 6 to 9 month turnaround time is for the more violent, and up to a year for the burglaries. But yes, there are, generally we will get in close to 2,000 cases a year, and we will flip them out generally in first in, first out process. There's times that some are court ordered ahead of another or prioritized, but pretty much it's regardless of the case type, it's going to take about 9 months on average.
Could you speak to how many labs they have throughout the state? I think there's 3.
There are actually 6 labs across the state. Out of those 6, the Northern Lab, the lab in Louisville, and the lab in Madisonville all have biologists on location that can actually screen the evidence for the identification of biological fluids, and from there they will be sent to the central lab where the DNA actually will be extracted and analyzed and loaded into the database.
Can you speak to how many rape kits you received in 2014 versus how many you tested in that year?
I don't know if I have that number off the top of my head. I could find that later. Probably, I would say it's probably about 70% would be just because of that delay in getting the cases. We really don't count them by we worked so many sexual assault cases, we worked so many homicide cases. It's really we worked cases in general.
What was your name?
I'm Laura Sudkamp.
Director of the lab.
Can you spell your last name, Sudkamp?
It's S as in Sam, U-D, and then Camp with a K.
And Laura, just to be clear, if the state discovers this large backlog out there, all these untested rape kits are not going to be sent to the central crime lab for testing, thereby causing an even larger backlog for you. Is that correct? They'll be outsourced, the testing will be?
Yes, that is correct. Our goal is we really needed to know if there is a problem. We have no idea if there is or isn't. So we would like help with the auditor's office to find out just how many really are out there. Like we said, there could be hundreds, there could be thousands. We don't know. But once we do get a number, we can apply for grant money that will allow us to send those cases out, to be outsourced by a vendor laboratory while we continue working the current cases. That will stop us from getting logged even further. That is the intent of a lot of the federal money that's out there, is to help the crime labs. Let's get these cases in. Let's get these profiles into the database. Cases might need to be resubmitted. Actually, your case was submitted on time, and it was worked right away, and it was connected by an old technology called RFLP, and and it was connected when they were looking through those cases, but it went into the database when we actually reran everything through grant money and converted it over with PCR technology, and we're able to put it in the database. The database is really the key here. A lot of agencies don't realize the power of that DNA database. We want the samples in so that even if a witness is not cooperating, or if prosecution isn't sure if they're going to go forward, we still want the kit so that hopefully we can link it if there is someone else doing it. If there's another victim out there, we can link those cases together, just like yours, and see if you've got a serial rapist out there. It's getting those cases in so the law enforcement thinks, okay, KSB has a backlog, we don't necessarily want to send this case in if we don't think it's going to go to trial. We're trying to get that message out that we do still want those kits to come in, because the database can start putting identities to cases.
If a test kit is processed at a hospital, where does it go from there? Does it go into an evidence
Generally, it will go back to the law enforcement, investigating law enforcement agency.
Okay.
Is there a time limit on how, on a kit being testable, or is that forever?
As long as they were maintained at room temperature, if they were the old style kit that have a blood tube in them, that might be a little bit of a problem if they didn't have it in the refrigerator. But if it was a dried specimen or just a buccal swab, then really as long as they're at the room temperature, we want them.
That was a question for me. There was a fourth one, I was told, in our case, but hers was damaged when they retested it, I think. So what would cause it to do that? Just
I would say back then it was probably liquid blood,
okay.
but I'm not quite sure.
I never asked that question, so I was
I really don't know the details on that part of it.
sure.
What would you do with the
database match with databases in other states?
The DNA database is a national database. It also, because of this, the FBI maintains the database, they own it, and they set the rules for what goes in and out of it. And that is part of where additional confusion comes from with submitting the kits from law enforcement, is that in the past, if you had a suspect, before we could put the DNA from the crime into the crime scene, or into the DNA database, we had to compare it to the suspect first. Now, because there's problems with probable cause, they can't get a warrant for the suspect standard, as long as they have made a good faith effort to get that standard, and basically have not been able to, the guy is not cooperating, they can't get a court order, he's disappeared, as long as they did try to get it and can get that information to us, we can now load that into the database, where in the past we couldn't. So a lot of law enforcement agencies were unable to get a suspect standard, so they stopped submitting those kits, and those need to come in.
So you're assured you're gonna get federal grant money just by counting these kits?
It's not guaranteed, however, it is it's very available out there, very much available out there right now for this purpose. So we feel we will get some money, and if we don't, we have other grant money that we get annually on a kind of a block. Kentucky gets this much, and we will throw some of that money into the pot needed to get these cases working.
The point is, the information will be actionable and acted on.
Yes.
Is there any specific name or part of a federal grant, or where this federal grant money is coming from?
It's coming from the National Institute of Justice. They have a whole series of federal grants that go toward law enforcement and the crime labs. And then the Manhattan DA's office
35 million.
has $35 million that they're doing nationwide, not just for New York, but nationwide.
You mentioned
Thank you.
using blood samples before, maybe changes now. Are there changes maybe coming down the pike that could make these things faster to test, more streamlined and efficient?
We have added robotics, which has helped. Those are coming up online. The instruments are getting bigger, where they can handle more samples and do them more quickly. The problem is that those instruments cost, $150,000, $200,000 a piece. So getting enough, when you're getting $600,000 in grant money to buy the chemicals, to buy the equipment, to buy everything you need to work those cases, you're not going to be able to get more than one of those instruments every now and then, and that's a big problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.